And speaking of getting worse, today is Amazon and Lord of the Rings Day. I mean, the goddamn show isn't even out, and we could probably fill entire Archcasts with just the nonsense that has been popping up around this. So, Amazon recently revealed their division wide policy, which underscores its commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity for its content and productions. And immediately, every single alarm bell in my skull is like, I've seen these words before. They usually mean lies. Lots of lies, in fact.
It just keeps getting bigger. I'm sorry, I'm too distracted by the LGBTQIA plus.
It gets slightly longer every time. It's
It's like
remarkable, really.
LGBTQIA. Elemental PQRSTY. Oh, we don't know the Q, but it's a different Q, okay? It's a different Q. The Q continuum. There you go.
Now, to be fair, this is not a set in stone hard rule, quote unquote, just yet. Though, it's one of those corporate instruction manuals, which is like, well, we don't technically have the authority to order you to do this, but you might have to look for another job if you don't, kind of style things. Let's see. So, what will this mean for Lord of the Rings then? Well, each film or series with a creative team of three or more people, which you can bet you're happy the last Lord of the Rings TV show has, should ideally include a minimum of 30% women and 30% members of underrepresented racial ethnic groups. This aspiration goal will increase to 50% by 2024. So, I'm okay. So in Lord of the Rings, we are going to have 50% people, which are both women and people of color. That's going to be an interesting Numenor.
Don't worry. Numenorians were, I don't know, rainbow people or
Diverse.
something. Numenorian's not a race anymore. It's an idea, okay? Oh.
Now, on the bright side, they do say in the next one, though, casting actors whose identity, gender identity, nationality, race, ethnic, sexual, blah, 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 aligns with the characters they will be playing, right? That is actually mildly hopeful. So they're going to try to match them up against one another. At that point, I'm kind of like, okay, you're either now going to have to write a show specifically to reach your diversity quotas, or you're gonna have to
Is
force
the
it in. Like,
diversity quota not necessarily the actors, but the staff behind the scenes and the various support crews?
I don't know. It's written. Each film says with a creative team of three or more people in above the line roles, director and producers should ideally include a minimum, blah 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 blah. Should include a minimum. So I don't know. Does that mean actors? Does that mean people in total? I guess it could mean either because they're not being very
Like
specific.
most film crews, as we all know, most of them aren't actors. Like the vast majority of them are support crew, staff, and people that do the sets and makeup, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like only a minority are the actual actors.
But then there's the next point too, and that is to aiming to include one character from each of the following categories in speaking roles, with a minimum of 50% of these being women. Letter plus sign. Person with disability, and three regionally underrepresented race, ethnic, cultural groups. So I'm assuming regionally underrepresented. Okay. So if they're doing a show like Netflix Narcos, right, that takes place in Colombia, we're gonna have a random Norwegian just walk on stage and go like bork 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 bork, and then walk off again.
Now I gotta ask you, are you just feeling bored? Like looking at this, like I'm just like, eh. Like I've just sort of been spinning in my chair, like the whole fucking thing, like they're gonna do this, right? Whatever, and the show's gonna be trash because they're so focused on race, which is a really weird thing to be hyper focused on sexuality, etc., etc. And it's like, where's the Lord of the Rings? Like, I don't give a shit about whether you're purple or green anymore. Like, just fucking make a Lord of the Rings show. Like, this doesn't matter. None of this shit matters about the show. Like, this means nothing. Oh, it's so fucking garbagey. It's already reeks of failure because, like, look at our diversity. Okay, so your show's so bad that you have to make us look at things that aren't related to the show. Like, is it really that bad already? Is it real? They're grasping for straws here.
Presumably. And that's the thing too, like, this is a thing that must be paid attention to because the only way they will ever move away from this is if they receive the signal that it is not profitable. The Marvel EVP recently made it clear that they're doing it for the money. You can bet your ass Amazon's doing it for the same reason. This is a nice, big, fat little virtue signal to bring attention to themselves. And they don't care. I mean, hell, I'm pretty sure most of these things. Now, I don't know the US law, but in Norway, if you're doing a hiring interview, you're not allowed to ask people about their sexual orientation or disabilities, etc. It's literally not legal. In fact, for example, if you're hiring a woman, you're not allowed to ask them if they intend to have a child in the next period of time, because that might be gender discrimination.
This is silly. Think about it. We're talking about this. Like, this is a thing that's actually happening.
Absolutely.
This is ridiculous. Somebody wrote an article about this. Somebody in Amazon Studios was like, yes, I'm going to do this. This is the thing I'm going to focus on. Sure, should we focus on making a good show? No. Let's focus on hiring diverse hires. You know what this reminds me of? I talked to a developer at HBS, Harebrained Schemes, on Twitter. They were like, we're going to do inclusive hiring. And I'm like, okay, that's whatever, but like, are you going to focus on people who have the skills for it? They're like, that's none of your concern. It's like, okie dokie. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's that same mentality. It's like, and then the game came out, and the game's a buggy, shitty little mess. And it's like, oh, well, it would have been what if you had hired people with the actual technical know-how and skill? See, merit is more important than skin color. Or sexual
Not
preference.
anymore, it isn't. In fact, Amazon, they also mentioned that Amazon will provide the studios with a report sheet, which they have to fill out within a month of principal photography being wrapped up, so that Amazon can rate them in accordance with this.
What the hell? Like, who's...
And the worst part is too, right? Okay, so
why?
well, again, one of the things that I really don't understand is how are they allowed to do this? Like, seeking at least 3 bids from vendors or suppliers on productions, one of which must be from a woman-owned business and one from a minority-owned business. All right. I'm pretty sure it's not legal to hire based on these characteristics, and yet it's done everywhere. That's what boggles me. It's not like they're covert about it. This is literally in their brief, an open article.
It is. This is, honestly, in my mind, this whole thing is not only sexist, but extremely racist. Because they're hyper specifically focusing on sex and race.
Huh?
This should be lauded as a big, like, this is very narrow-minded and closed-minded. Because all they can see is in race and sex. They can't see you for who you are. You aren't defined by your race. It's just a trait you were born with. You aren't defined by your sex. That was just a thing you were born with. You aren't defined by your sexual preference. That's just a thing you choose to do with your, lewd time. But it's one of those things where it's like, this is not relevant. None of this matters in the long scheme of things. Like, it's a show about Lord of the Rings, about Tolkien's work. It doesn't matter if you're gay or if you're black or green or whatever. As long as you fit the bill and fit the part and can do the job. Like, okay, let's say, for whatever reason, they're Numenorians, right? Okay, in lore, they wouldn't be black. But does that mean black people couldn't work on this project? No, of course not. You could do sound design, directing, support and other various roles. Background characters in the background. Lord of the Rings, I think they actually had quite a few African people play backdrop characters. It's fine. Like, sure, it may not be a theme. It'd be the same thing if we made, like, a movie about the Zulus, and it's about the Zulu tribe specifically, and it's centered around them. I don't want to see, like,
It'd
Asians.
be weird to have a white dude in the Zulu tribe.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to see white dudes or Asians or anything like that. I want to see Zulus. because Zulus are cool and they run really fast and poke you with their pointy spear. That hurts. But yeah, like it would be just as laughable. Or if you watched a, some sort of historical movie in India where it's about Indians fighting some other group of you know, Arabs or something. Like I wouldn't expect to see white Europeans there, and I don't want to. Because it's immersion
Well,
breaking.
it's literally a requirement from Amazon's side now that you need to have regionally marginalized people. So you're gonna see white people in the Zulu horde now. That's the thing. Congratulations.
That's so silly.
It doesn't matter. And another thing, dude, like the chat brings up an interesting point. You kind of touched upon it as well. We haven't seen a damn thing about the Lord of the Rings yet. No, not so much as a screenshot, as a goddamn photo. All we get is this shit. Amazon going like, yeah, we're gonna hire based on race. Like, okay, but could we get something else? Like, what are you doing exactly?
Mm-hmm. It's silly.
And yet, it is important. Though you also know that a lot of this is corporate bullshit. Let me just point out one of the points here. Pay equity across casting, behind the camera staff and crew, and for vendors and suppliers.
Oh yeah, that's
Pay
happened.
equity, right? You know the actors are going to pay equity for the actors, pay equity for everyone involved in this project, right? So the guy with like 10 years of education to be like this absurdo graphic editing dude is going to have pay equity with the dude who points the camera. Excuse me?
Yep. The large corporations do this all the time. In fact, one of the large corporations we work with in anti-piracy sent this thing going, we want to know your diversity like options and plans for your corporation. And we're like, no. Like that's none of your
No.
business. Like you don't get to come in and dictate what we do internally. We're a vendor. We are a separate entity. You don't have that jurisdiction. And then they pissed off. But it's one of those things where it's like they'll fucking do that. And they do that to every vendor too. Like it's pretty bad, especially in when you get to work with these big corporations. Like this kind of stuff happens all the time. Like diversity, and they just throw it around because they don't even know what the word means anymore. Like they're like diversity for the sake of diversity. It's like no, like true equality means being blind to color. You should only see merit.
You should have sent an email back saying, we intend to hire nothing but white people to make it easier for companies like you to be diverse.
Yes, we need see that our minority as is. We're thinking out.
Yeah.
Thing is,
We're helping you here.
That's so silly. Thing is, like, that's the same for like your project and my project that we're both working on. You didn't hire the artists, and I didn't hire artists that were based on race. We hired them based on their talent and skill, and whether they could get the job done.
Well, I hired my Serbian as a diversity hire because the Serbs are strange people. He ticks multiple boxes, I'm sure.
He is a Serbian.
Yeah, they are strange people. What can we say? See, the chat brings up another good point right there. Equity pay is the new minimum wage. That is so true, because it will be used as a justification go like, yes, but you see, the cameraman's only paid this much, so you can only be paid this.
Equity is
Aw.
bullshit because all that does is you guys remember, did you ever have any school projects where they did like social little experiments? We did one where it's like everybody was rated as like a bulk thing, so whatever the average was, and so nobody tried, and so the overall grade score dropped.
Weird.
Because why try if you're going to be dragged down by the lowest common denominator? Like, there's no point. Nothing you do
There's
matters.
no reason to stand out.
That kind of equity pay, like that's the same thing. Like for the artists I work with on my game, I pay them based on the work they do. If I paid them based on the bulk work they did, fuck, nothing would get done. Nothing would be done. It would be low quality too. Like that's just stupid. Like the idea that equity is even a thing. It's a childish like fantasy to begin with. And these quote unquote adults are like, yes, we would use equity. It's like this is a failed ideal. Like it hasn't worked. It's never worked, and it's still not working. Now we are equally poor. That's my favorite one right there, Mr. Long Dash Man.
We are equally poor. And to continue on the topic of Lord of the Rings, because there's been a fair bit of this week. So, in what I can only describe as a Monty Python-esque sketch, a goddamn parody of reality, the Society of Tolkien is launching a counter-campaign against the Tolkien Society's diversity seminar.
So different branches within Tolkien are fighting each other.
Yeah, the Society of Tolkien versus the Tolkien Society. Why? Why are these the names you have chosen? Oh, it's so stupid. Now, on the bright side, this is the kind of thing that I have been talking about and trying to encourage. This is a force within the fandom itself, seeing the ridiculous diversity narrative cluster that the Tolkien Society was going on about, which includes such bangers as queer aesthetics, agnostics, and animists.
Animus?
Pardoning Sauron, the queer in Tolkien's The Lord of the Ring.
That's a bit rude to queer people, I guess. The bad guy who's a queer. Because he's bad. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Something mighty queer, destabilizing cis hetero, amatonomarlative in the works. Like, they're just making up words at this point. They're just like, this sounds retarded. This will fool the normies. And like, I don't know what these words mean. Cis hetero, scusi?
Hetero. You mean normal. Like.
And my personal favorite, bearing in mind again, Tolkien based a lot of the Lord of the Rings on his experiences of war, his vehement opposition to authoritarianism, and on his personal faith. And so, when you see a diversity seminar called Projecting Indian Myths, Culture, and History onto Tolkien's World, all you can imagine then is a person just holding the book and going like, did you write this? Tolkien goes, yes. Then you go to the screen, the meme, and then this dude just holding up the book. I wrote this.
Yep.
Mine.
Well, it's like this all the time. The minute the writer dies or has been gone, they try to hijack someone else's work. Like, look what Disney did with Star Wars, and he's still alive. Oh.
Well, who can we call what that poor bastard does living? Watching his creation be roundly raped in front of him.
I mean, I can't feel bad for him because he's the idiot who sold it to Disney, who he called white slavers before selling it.
Yeah, but then they slapped him across the face with like $1 billion in cash, and
he was already rich.
what
I don't even know
perspective
why
things.
you want even more money.
You can always be richer, Kyle. You can always have another swimming pool.
Honestly, like, I just want one house. That's it.
But yeah, like, this is really heartening because it is a group within the Tolkien fandom, within the Lord of the Rings fandom, which looks at what is obvious nonsense and says, okay, we're going to launch our own counterpoint to this with reasonable things like Middle-earth history, works influenced by Tolkien's writing, and works which influenced Tolkien's writing. Stuff actually related to the setting and to the fandom instead of the outside political nonsense that is Desire of the Ring, an Indian academic's adventure and the quest for the perilous realm.
Interesting.
It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense anymore.
I'm sure it does to somebody who's on meth.
Maybe. It's nice to see. And I think this is going to be a very interesting thing for gatekeeping as a whole, honestly. The Amazon TV series is the first one where the fandom actually has a working understanding of what is currently happening to them and the potential will to actually stand up and resist it. Kind of like a lot of people who read the Game of Thrones books, for example, were really pissed off by the TV series, but they didn't really know what was going on. They couldn't really react to it. And to be fair to the Game of Thrones thing, that wasn't a diversity problem. That was incompetent writers running out of source material problem.
Well, not just writing on the source. They were trying to run away so they could go do the Star Wars TV show, the Old Republic
You
one.
could go and violate something else.
Because they're like, ooh, Star Wars? Okay, sorry, George. Like, Game of Thrones is like a fat, dumb little IP that's literally a fad and will fade away into obscurity. They're like, we want Star Wars. And I don't blame them. But at the same time, they reap what they sow. And they were idiots. If you leave a job half done, people are going to be mad about it. And they're going to try to cancel you. And then they got canceled.
Weird that. It's a nice thing to see. I am optimistic. Optimistic is a strong word, but who knows? I mean, they've already ordered 3 seasons of this stuff, so with a little bit of luck, maybe the first one will be awful, and maybe the second and the third will be something actually worth viewing. Optimism, Kyle. It is a fine thing.
Doesn't exist.
I'm still mildly tempted to actually see if I can. I should actually sign up for this awful seminar and record it, because I'm sure it would make for excellent viewing material in and of itself.